The detonation of light rolled across Metropolis like a second sunrise, blinding in its brilliance, deafening in its violence. Buildings trembled, rivers of shattered glass cascaded from towers, and for one suspended instant the entire city seemed to hold its breath. Then, as though the sky itself had exhaled, the light collapsed inward, sucking the monstrous kaiju into a convulsion of molten fissures and breaking bone-like structures. Its roar fractured into silence. Where the beast had once stood, only steaming ruin and dark water remained, the harbor boiling with its last breath. Superman fell with it, his body limp, tumbling like a broken comet. He struck the water, vanishing beneath waves that hissed against the embers of the beast. For a long moment, the world was empty of sound save the settling groan of ruined steel and the whisper of fire. And then, from every corner of the city, came the silence of millions watching and waiting for the figure they had seen glowing brighter than the sun. In the command center, Marcus staggered back from his console, face pale, chest rising and falling in panicked gasps. "He's gone," he whispered, unable to tear his eyes from the dimmed monitors. The data streams had flatlined. The resonance was over. Ethan's jaw was clenched so tightly it felt carved from stone. Yet even as despair threatened to seize him, he refused to let it. "Search the water," he ordered sharply, voice cutting through the haze. "Deploy every drone, every diver we have. He's not gone. Not yet." Above ground, rescue crews swarmed into the smoking streets, sirens echoing against shattered skyscrapers. Civilians stumbled through dust clouds, faces streaked with soot, some cradling children, some clutching strangers' hands. And still, their eyes turned upward or toward the harbor, searching the smoke for that single silhouette. The waves shifted. A ripple, faint at first, then stronger. Suddenly, a geyser erupted as a figure broke the surface. Superman emerged slowly, his cape torn to ribbons, his body trembling, skin ashen from the energy he had expelled. His breaths came ragged, his eyes half-lidded. Yet he was alive. A cheer rose from the city, not orchestrated, not unified, but raw and spontaneous, thousands of voices crying out in relief and gratitude. The sound reached him even across the water. He swayed in the sky, barely able to stay aloft, but the sight of his people, their fists raised, their voices thunderous, gave him the strength to keep rising. Back in the command center, Marcus collapsed into his chair, burying his face in his hands, relief breaking him open. Ethan allowed himself a single exhale, the steel in his demeanor softening into something warmer, though still burdened by the weight of what they had all witnessed. "He did it," Ethan murmured. "By God, he actually did it." But the victory was not without shadow. The Kaiju's death had scarred the city beyond recognition. Whole districts lay in ruins, bridges snapped, power grids fried. Tens of thousands were homeless, countless injured. Superman, hovering over it all, saw every broken street, every smoldering ruin. His heart ached. He had saved them, yes, but at a cost that would take years to mend. And he knew more would come. This monster had not appeared by chance. Something had sent it or unleashed it. The truth of that weighed heavily on him. Landing at last near the command center, Superman staggered, his legs nearly buckling under his own weight. Ethan stepped forward, catching him with a steadiness that surprised even Superman. The soldier looked him in the eye, and for the first time there was no skepticism, no guarded distance, only respect. "You've done enough," Ethan said quietly. "Rest. We'll take it from here." Superman gave a weary smile, though his eyes burned with the stubborn fire of a man who refused to yield. "There's no resting. Not while there are more like it." Marcus approached then, his usual nervousness subdued by awe. "You pushed beyond anything I thought possible," he admitted. His voice shook, but not from fear, rather from reverence. "You were the frequency. You were the weapon." Superman placed a hand on his shoulder, his strength faint but his sincerity unshaken. "No, Marcus. You were. Ethan was. Every man and woman who refused to give up was the weapon. I was just the one holding the line. Those words lingered, sinking deep into the men who had doubted, questioned, even resented his presence. In that moment, the divide between Superman and humanity seemed smaller, the bond stronger. He was not above them but among them. The night deepened, the fires dimming, the first fragile stars peeking through the soot-stained sky. Superman turned his gaze upward, sensing the vastness beyond the clouds. Somewhere out there, forces waited. He had faced one creature and nearly burned himself out stopping it. What of the next? The thought gnawed at him, yet he felt no despair. Only determination. If anything, the battle had shown him the strength not only of his own resolve but of the people he protected. Ethan watched him silently, his soldier's mind already cataloging strategies, contingencies, preparations. Marcus scribbled notes furiously, determined to refine the resonance discovery, to build something stronger for the battles to come. And in the streets of Metropolis, people began to rebuild, not just their city but their hope. As Superman lifted once more into the sky, bruised but unbroken, the city below erupted again in cheers. He hovered, silhouetted against the moonlight, a lone guardian keeping watch over the scars of battle. His body screamed for rest, his spirit bore the weight of worlds, yet his eyes burned with the promise of a man who would never, ever stop. The Kaiju was gone. Metropolis still stood. And though the war was far from over, this night had proven one immutable truth. Humanity, with Superman at its side, would not break. Above the ruins, with the smoke drifting like ghosts and the stars slowly reclaiming the heavens, Superman soared into the darkness. Not as a god, not as a savior alone, but as the embodiment of a promise, that even against monsters born of nightmares, there would always be someone to rise, someone to fight, someone to believe. And in the silence that followed, the city slept, knowing that promise still burned bright. Every broadcast tower in Metropolis lit up, pulsing with invisible waves that resonated across the air like an unearthly song. The sound was imperceptible to human ears but not to the beast. It writhed, fissures trembling, its body vibrating violently as if the resonance threatened to tear it apart. For the first time, Superman felt the creature weaken in his grip. The ground shook with the force of its convulsions, buildings teetering on collapse, bridges snapping under the seismic waves. But Superman clung to the Kaiju, pouring every ounce of his strength into holding it steady against the resonance. His muscles screamed, his bones felt as if they would crack under the strain, yet he did not falter. Ethan leaned over Marcus's console, eyes locked on the readings. "It's working," he murmured, awe breaking through his stoic demeanor. "It's actually working." But Marcus's face was pale. "Not enough. Its body is adapting faster than the towers can output. It's stabilizing." His hands trembled over the controls. "We need more power. A magnitude more." Superman, still grappling with the monster, heard every word. His jaw tightened, his mind racing. He could give them that power. His body was a living battery of solar energy, a reservoir unlike anything on Earth. But to unleash it at that scale meant burning himself out, emptying his cells in one devastating surge. He thought of Lois, of his parents, of the countless lives watching and waiting below. He thought of the city that had always believed in him, hovering inches from the monster's burning face. He whispered words that only he could hear. For them. The light within him began to intensify, radiating outward until his entire body became a beacon piercing the smoke-choked sky. The Kaiju shrieked, sensing the storm about to break. In the command center, Ethan saw the glow on the monitors and realized what Superman was about to do. His throat tightened, but he didn't stop him. He only said with quiet conviction, "Godspeed." Superman let the power surge free, a tidal wave of solar energy pouring from his body into the resonance stream. The towers amplified it beyond human limits, channeling the full might of the sun into the Kaiju's core. The monster convulsed violently, its fissures overloading, its body trembling as though caught between existence and annihilation. The streets of Metropolis lit like daylight, shadows banished by the radiance of one man's sacrifice. People paused mid-flight, staring upward, tears in their eyes, not in fear but in awe. And then, with a deafening roar, the kaiju buckled. Its body cracked, fissures bursting outward in gouts of molten light. Superman pressed harder, forcing the creature down into the harbor as its very structure began to collapse. But the light that consumed it was consuming him as well. His body dimmed, his movements slowing, his energy pouring out faster than it could ever be replenished. The last thing he saw before darkness crowded his vision was the skyline of Metropolis, still standing, still alive. The kaiju let out one final, strangled bellow as its body ruptured, sending shockwaves across the city. And in that moment, the battle teetered on the edge of finality, its outcome uncertain but inevitable. The air above Metropolis was heavy with smoke and ozone, a choking haze that turned the once proud skyline into a blurred silhouette. Superman hovered at its center, battered yet unyielding, his cape torn and edges singed, his body aching from blows that would have leveled mountains. Across from him, the kaiju loomed, its body glowing brighter with every heartbeat, its fissures now like rivers of magma threatening to split the city itself apart. Every second that passed deepened the certainty. This wasn't merely a creature. It was a calamity incarnate. From the subterranean command center, Ethan Cross barked orders to keep the evacuation moving, his voice steady even as the tremors above rattled the reinforced walls. Screens showed the devastation in brutal detail. Entire districts reduced to rubble, emergency crews overwhelmed, helicopters barely managing to thread through plumes of fire and smoke. Yet amid the chaos, Ethan's gaze kept returning to the lone figure in blue and red. The Man of Steel was fighting not only a monster but inevitability itself. Marcus Vera, hunched over his console, finally broke the silence that had been gnawing at him for minutes. "I think I've found something," he muttered, his tone more hopeful than certain. Ethan turned sharply, striding toward him. Marcus pointed at the data streams scrolling across his screen. "It's not invincible. Its body resonates at a frequency, something deep and old tied to its biology. If we can disrupt that resonance, even briefly, it might collapse under its own instability." "Resonance," Ethan repeated, eyes narrowing. "Like shattering glass with sound." "Exactly. But the frequency range is massive. We'd need a signal strong enough to penetrate its core. And if we're off by even a fraction, it could adapt, or worse, use the energy against us." Ethan weighed the risk with the practiced coldness of a man who had been forced to make impossible decisions. "Can you build it?" Marcus hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, but it'll take time. And we don't have much of that." Outside, Superman darted in again, his fists hammering the kaiju's jaw in a blur of motion. Each strike landed with the force of tectonic shifts, yet the monster only grew brighter, hungrier. The impact of its counterblow sent Superman crashing through another high-rise, which crumbled in his wake like a toy struck by a hammer. He staggered to his feet in the wreckage, concrete dust caking his hair and skin, his chest heaving with exertion. For the first time in years he felt his strength slipping, not because it was leaving him, but because every ounce he gave only made his enemy stronger. Still, when he rose, the people watching from shattered windows or huddling in the streets saw not despair, but defiance. He was bruised, battered, bleeding, but still standing. And in that they saw something worth clinging to. The kaiju bellowed again, a guttural sound that rippled through the city and shook bones. Its clawed hand swung downward, aimed to crush Superman entirely. He caught it mid-swing, boots grinding furrows into the pavement as he resisted the impossible weight. Sparks of energy leapt from its body into his, searing his nerves. Pain lanced through him, bright and unrelenting. Yet his eyes burned with determination as he forced the beast's claw back an inch at a time, a man pushing back against the tide of apocalypse. In the command center, Marcus typed furiously, "I can piggyback a signal through the city's broadcast towers. But we'll need a power source strong enough to amplify it beyond anything human-made." His eyes flicked to Ethan, then back to the live feed of Superman. The implication was clear. Ethan exhaled slowly. Of course. He'll have to be the source. Superman lifted into the air again, his mind racing even as his body screamed in protest. He had been listening through the comlink all along, hearing Marcus's calculations, Ethan's commands, the frantic voices of soldiers and civilians alike. He knew the plan before Ethan spoke it aloud, and he understood what it meant. He would not simply fight this creature with fists or heat vision, but with the very essence of who he was. Hovering above the monster, he clenched his fists and closed his eyes briefly. He let the sun's power within him surge, a furnace ignited by years of unwavering faith in the world he called home. His body glowed faintly, as though his skin itself was becoming light. The kaiju reacted instantly, its fissures flaring as if sensing a feast approaching. It lunged upward, jaws wide enough to swallow buildings, claws stretching to rend the heavens. But Superman didn't retreat. He dove headlong into its path, colliding with the monster in a shockwave that rippled across the entire city. The collision stunned the kaiju, if only for a moment, and Marcus seized it. Now, begin the transmission. The kaiju's roar echoed like a chorus of collapsing mountains, its shockwaves battering the city with invisible fists. Windows exploded outward, showering the streets in glass, and the once orderly avenues of Metropolis dissolved into chaos. Amid the fleeing masses, Superman was the only figure advancing, cutting upward into the air, his cape flaring like a scarlet banner against the monster's abyssal form. He closed the distance with blinding speed and drove his shoulder into the kaiju's torso, pushing it back a step, the river churning violently beneath its feet. But it did not fall. Instead, the glow in its fissures intensified, veins of incandescent light threading across its body like molten rivers. The shock of Superman's strike radiated back through him, a force he felt not only in his bones but deep in his solar-fed cells. He faltered midair, eyes narrowing. This thing was not just resistant, it was feeding on his power. From the command center, Ethan Cross saw it clearly through the satellite feed. "It's absorbing energy," he snapped, turning to Marcus Vera. "Your sensors confirm that." Marcus's hands flew across the console, sweat beading his brow. "Yes, every kinetic strike amplifies its readings. It's metabolizing his attacks like fuel. Which means the harder he hits, the stronger it gets," Ethan said flatly, the words striking the room like a hammer. "He can't fight this thing the way he usually does." On the feed, Superman shifted tactics, darting in with lightning-fast precision strikes, blows meant to disorient rather than destroy. He circled the kaiju like a hawk, eyes burning with concentration. He thought of every battle he had fought, Zod, Doomsday, Darkseid's legions, and realized none of them matched this. Those adversaries had been conquerors, wielders of will and intellect. This was something else entirely, a creature of instinct and raw hunger, older than cities, older perhaps than civilization itself. Its very existence was a catastrophe. The kaiju struck back with terrifying swiftness, its massive tail whipping across the skyline. Superman braced himself, but the impact hurled him across 3 city blocks, his body smashing through steel and concrete before he emerged, coughing dust, determination etched across his face. Ethan slammed his fist against the table. "Damn it, he can't keep trading blows. Marcus, tell me you've got options." Marcus hesitated, fingers trembling as they danced across data streams. "If it's metabolizing energy, then it has a threshold. Too much intake might destabilize it. But finding that limit without burning the city to ash." He trailed off, unwilling to finish. Ethan filled the silence, his voice iron. "Then we don't gamble the city. We find another way." Superman re-engaged, grappling with the kaiju as it advanced inland. Each step of the beast shattered streets, toppled buildings, and ruptured gas lines that sent plumes of fire into the night sky. His arms strained against its bulk, every muscle taut, But even with his strength he felt the futility of trying to halt a mountain in motion. He glanced down, seeing the waves of people still trapped in the city, caught in the bottleneck of evacuation routes. Their screams reached him more clearly than the monster's roars. He realized then the true battle wasn't merely against the kaiju, it was against time. In the command center, Ethan's strategy sharpened. "Listen up," he barked to his team. "We split the evacuation. Direct half the population east as planned, but open secondary corridors south, even if it slows us. The creature's trajectory is north by northwest. Keep civilians opposite its path. Get the National Guard positioned along the evacuation grid. Our job isn't to kill that thing. It's to keep people breathing long enough for Superman to find a solution." Marcus glanced at him, conflicted. "You're assuming he can." "I'm assuming he'll try," Ethan answered, his tone unyielding. "But if he fails, humanity doesn't end here. Not on my watch." As if to punctuate his words, Superman unleashed his heat vision, twin beams of searing energy that lanced into the Kaiju's chest. The fissures flared blindingly, the monster staggering for the first time under the onslaught. For a fleeting moment hope surged. Crowds watching from afar cheered, their faith in their savior reaffirmed. Then the impossible happened. The fissures expanded, cracks widening across its hide until its entire body radiated with fiery brilliance. The kaiju roared louder than before, its strength multiplying as it surged forward, swatting Superman from the sky like an insect. He plummeted into the harbor, the impact sending a tidal surge across the waterfront, drowning entire blocks beneath a wall of water. In the command center, silence reigned. Every screen showed the same devastating truth. Superman, the Man of Steel, had been struck down. Ethan broke the silence with his low, steady voice. "So it feeds on energy. Then we stop giving it what it wants." He turned to Marcus. "Find me a weakness. Anything biological. Heat's power fine. What does it choke on?" Marcus's eyes widened as calculations sparked in his mind. "If we could generate a disruptive frequency, something that doesn't fuel it but destabilizes its structure, then build it," Ethan cut in. "Prototype theory, I don't care. Get it done. I'll buy you the time." Meanwhile, underwater, Superman pushed against the crushing weight of debris and currents. His chest burned, not from lack of air but from frustration. He could still hear the Kaiju's footfalls through the water, each step dragging it closer to the city's heart. He pushed free of the rubble and shot skyward once more, water streaming from him as he hovered above the ruined harbor. His body ached, but his spirit was iron. He thought of Jonathan Kent, his adoptive father, reminding him as a boy that strength was more than fists. It was endurance, the will to rise when the world tried to crush you. He carried those words now as he set his jaw and rose again, battered but unbroken. The kaiju turned its abyssal gaze toward him, fissures blazing brighter as if mocking his persistence. Superman met its stare, his voice a quiet vow meant for no one but himself. "Metropolis stands. Not while I still breathe." In the command center, Ethan watched the red and blue figure ascend once more into the monster's shadow. A flicker of respect crossed his hardened features, not of blind faith but of recognition. Superman would fight until his last breath, but Ethan knew it was up to men like him and Marcus to ensure that last breath wasn't wasted. The kaiju lifted both claws, crashing them down with seismic force, shattering a swath of skyscrapers. Superman intercepted, straining with every ounce of strength, his muscles screaming as he pushed back against the weight of annihilation. For one suspended instant, he held the beast at bay. But the monster's glow only deepened. The struggle was far from over, and both man and beast understood it was only the beginning. The tremors came first, subtle at the beginning, like the vibration of a subway car passing deep beneath the city streets. To most of Metropolis, they were an odd inconvenience. Coffee rippled in mugs, windows rattled faintly, and office workers looked up from their screens with mild irritation. But to Ethan Cross, the decorated ex-military officer turned civil defense coordinator, they were alarms sounding beneath the surface of normal life. He had felt ground quakes before. Afghanistan, the Balkans, training exercises where artillery rolled across valleys, and these tremors carried the same edge of imminent catastrophe. He pressed his palm flat against the conference table in the emergency command room, watching the glass of water before him sway with the rhythm of something vast and deliberate. Across from him, Dr. Marcus Vera, wiry and sharp-eyed, scrolled frantically through seismic data on his laptop. "It's not tectonic," Marcus muttered. His voice clipped with urgency. "This pattern isn't natural. It's rhythmic, almost biological." Ethan's jaw tightened. "You're telling me something is walking down there?" "Something alive," Marcus replied, lifting his gaze. "And enormous." The room fell silent, the background chatter of aides and junior officers thinning as the words carried their weight. Ethan broke it with his steady voice, honed from years of command. "Get me estimates. Size, depth, trajectory. If it surfaces anywhere near the river, we'll have minutes at best." While the staff moved with sudden purpose, Ethan stood tall, the memory of past battles flickering through his mind. He had spent his life planning for crises, but Metropolis was not a war zone. It was a city that leaned heavily on its champion. Superman had become a comforting myth to its people, a safety net so strong that human preparedness often seemed redundant. Ethan hated that. He respected the Kryptonian, but he despised the way ordinary men surrendered responsibility at the first sight of that red cape. Almost as if conjured by thought, Clark Kent was in the city that day, high above the skyline. Not Clark, not the mild-mannered reporter, but Superman, hovering silently above Metropolis towers, his hearing tuned to the strange pulse below the surface. He had felt the tremors before most instruments detected them, and his unease deepened with every beat that rose through the earth. He didn't know what it was, but instinct told him it was older and more dangerous than anything he had faced in recent memory. Back in the command room, Marcus projected a simulation onto the wall. A 3D model of Metropolis blinked to life, glowing grids across its streets and waterways. From the riverbed beneath the financial district, a red mass pulsed and spread, its tendrils extending like roots breaking free of confinement. "It's heading upward," Marcus said, his voice quivering with both fear and fascination. "If I'm right, this organism has been dormant beneath the river for centuries, maybe longer. These energy readings are off the charts." Ethan leaned closer, eyes narrowing. "How big?" Marcus hesitated before answering. "At least 200 meters long. Possibly more. The instruments can't lock onto its full scale." A murmur of disbelief rippled across the room. Ethan silenced it with a single glance. "Then we treat it as real until it kills us. Prepare evacuation corridors. Bridges, tunnels, everything. We move people east." "And what about him?" one of the younger aides asked timidly, unwilling to name Superman aloud, as if speaking it might summon or condemn. Ethan's lips thinned. "He'll come. He always does. But if we put everything on his shoulders, we've already lost." Above the city, Superman closed his eyes, feeling the heartbeat of something monstrous beneath the river. He dove sharply, streaking across the skyline until he reached the waterfront. Citizens below cheered and pointed, relief flooding them at the familiar figure cutting through the clouds. Superman ignored the adoration, his gaze fixed on the trembling waves of the river. The water frothed violently, boats capsizing as though something vast stirred beneath. Then the surface erupted. A column of water blasted upward, scattering steel barges like toys, as an immense shape rose from the depths. The creature towered over the skyline, its hide glistening like obsidian, its body segmented with glowing fissures that pulsed with sickly light. Jagged fins cut through its back, and its head split into a maw wide enough to swallow buildings whole. The roar that followed shook glass across half the city, a sound so primal it seemed to come from the bones of the earth itself. Panic rippled through the streets. Cars screeched to a halt, People scattered in all directions, and sirens wailed as the behemoth waded forward, each step sending tremors through concrete foundations. Inside the command center, Marcus gripped the edge of the table, eyes wide. "It's bigger than we thought. Far bigger." Ethan didn't flinch. He barked orders to his officers, his voice slicing through the chaos. "Activate all sirens, broadcast evacuation on every channel, clear the west side immediately, and get me a direct line to Superman." As if on cue, Superman streaked into the monster's path, planting himself between the Kaiju and the heart of Metropolis. The sight would have inspired awe in anyone watching, the lone figure of steel confronting an impossibility, but Ethan remained grim. He knew what the people thought, that this was the moment they could relax, because their savior had arrived. Yet he also knew better than anyone that even the strongest man could fall. The Kaiju swung its massive claw through the air, slicing across skyscrapers as though they were paper. Superman countered with a punch that cracked like thunder, the shock wave rippling across the river. For a moment, the monster staggered, and a cheer rose from the fleeing crowds. But then the Kaiju steadied itself, its glowing fissures brightening, feeding off the blow as if it had absorbed the very force of the attack. Ethan watched from the command center, his expression dark. He saw the civilians pausing to cheer, wasting precious seconds in their escape. He saw Superman straining against a foe that didn't yield, and he understood in that instant that this was not a battle one man could win, not even a man who could fly. He clenched his fists and muttered under his breath, words meant only for himself but echoing with bitter truth. If he falls, humanity falls with him. The ground trembled again, the Kaiju roared, and the battle for Metropolis had only begun.